I did a usability test for the application Uber, and I'm going to take you through my process and share my results. First step is looking at our research question. One of them was, what are the most common pain points associated with the Uber application? And this is sort of stemming from a larger research question or guiding question here, and it was, how can Uber optimize its application to reduce pain points associated with its user experience? So the way that I went about this was through multiple in-person moderated interviews with members of the core demographic. So I interviewed two female participants between the ages of 18 and 49. They were both, or one was 23 and the other was 24. And they had both not used the Uber application within the last 30 days, making them a lapsed Uber user. And these interviews lasted between 20 and 25 minutes. And the test consisted of about 5 tasks that I asked them to perform with a standardized or controlled device, the same phone, same operating system. And so the first task was I asked them to search for a standardized destination. So I had used a location that I knew both of them were familiar with and was in their area. So I asked each of them to search for the Westfield Century City Mall. And once they searched for it, I asked them to describe all of the ride types that are available, and then to evaluate them and select the ride that fit their the needs of the situation most appropriately. Once they did that, I asked them to identify the selected location or destination on a map, and then secure their meeting point for their driver. Once they did that, I asked them to locate, describe, and evaluate the safety toolkit, which is only accessible once you've confirmed your destination and your drive. And finally, I asked them if they could describe any ways in addition that they could suggest for improvement for Uber. So moving into the results, just a quick overview of the summary of what I found. Uber is the most salient rideshare service in the market among their core demographic. So both of my participants were more familiar, or even primarily or only familiar with the Uber app. Their primary competitor they found was Lyft, and still in each case, Uber was perceived to be more intuitive from a user experience perspective, and the troubleshooting within the Uber app was also described to be much more easily accessible and familiar. That said, I did find that Uber had many pain points associated with its user experience, and therefore many ways that Uber could optimize its application to improve the user experience. So on a basic level, the findings more specifically were that the search bar itself, which is the main element of the Uber app, is very easily accessible. The pickup location is not consistently accurate, so oftentimes Uber would select the neighboring house, the house across the street, or somewhere just a little bit off from where the user was. And even with the pin dropped just exactly where their blue dot or their blue GPS dot was showing them, the pickup location was still slightly off. That said, the ride types were all described to be extensive and covering any and all possible ride type desires or needs, including a wheelchair accessible option, and ride prices were also noted to be affordable and appropriate for their offering. Ride types were also very easily understood, so it was very clear with the description that Uber provides what each ride offers and what the difference in the price was. Also, the driver and the car details that Uber provides once confirmed were relatively consistent and accurate. There is some room for improvement there, just keeping things consistent across the board, whether there's, always a license plate or always like the correct color car, those types of things um, can, always room for improvement in terms of consistency. That said, the confirmation element was reported by both participants to feel a bit out of place. It comes, they felt that they should have confirmed their price and the length of time and all of those things that go along with their ride prior to confirming their payment. So, yeah, this is one area where the user experience could be improved. Also, the safety toolkit, neither of my participants actually knew that it existed, and they both had trouble finding it within the user interface. So I think this is another area that could lead to improvement or could require improvement there. Other than that, my participants were felt that the user interface was fairly seamless in that one screen led to a next. It was, it was beautifully like constructed from an app perspective, and yeah, just some minor little tweaks here and there to improve the overall interface or process. And finally, moving into the optimizations. So the recommendations I had based on what I found from my participants is one, that the GPS accuracy could be improved either by adding in additional data layers, by partnering with other data sources that could be added to increase their accuracy, whether this is through app partnerships or just updating the location software that Uber utilizes. Also, by applying or utilizing user-generated content, Uber can improve the sensibility of the drop-off points by having maybe users that are being dropped off or a subject pool indicate where the most logical points are, or even the establishments can indicate the most logical entry and exit points to improve the convenience element to the drop-off and pickup locations for users. Also, the safety toolkit could be bigger, more prominent, and in a more vibrant color to really catch the user's attention and make sure it's right in the forefront when and if they need it. Oh, go back in there real quick. So, also the safety toolkit, while both participants felt that the offerings were extensive and covered any safety concern they might have, the order in which that they were presented was not intuitive, in that the least emergent option was first. The first option was to learn more about the safety offerings, which, in the case of an emergency, both participants felt that they would like to have the 911 calling option more prioritized and heightened. And finally, another recommendation I have based on my findings is to implement more opportunities for user-generated content, or UGC-based optimizations, including the ride and driver type requests. So I'll go into an example soon, but one of my participants recommended or suggested that users could input or select whether or not it might be an interesting feature to include, to have a user be able to select the type of ride they're interested in, whether they're, tired and in search of just like a quiet ride, or if they're, feeling like they need a pick-me-up and want to chat their whole way to their destination. This might be a way to set Uber apart and take it to the next level. So moving into one example. So this, as I said, is the driver and ride preference. So I'll just take a quick look if I can get it to play. So on to the next example. This one is reflecting the need for the safety toolkit to be more prominent and increased in prominence in the app interface. All right, and moving on now to our next steps. So for future research, my recommendation would be to employ at least 50 additional unmoderated usability studies to increase the sample size, since unmoderated tests are much more efficient and simple to conduct. And this way we can maximize the access that we have to user data. Finally, once improvements have been made, we could follow up with additional moderated usability tests to have at least 10 total, as they're more expensive and time consuming. And in order to control for inter-rater reliability among the moderated tests, it'll be important that we have a standardized code book for these moderated interviews, and just so that there's, simple, objective things to look for each of the interviewers. And finally, we'll request follow-up interviews to determine the level of experience or user experience improvement that users have seen between the versions of Uber that they've tried out. Awesome. So thank you so much for hanging in there and listening to my usability tests.